Well, 2025 is coming into an end. There's only a few days left in the year. We turn the page. It's 2026. As the year winds down, we're trucking ahead, fully autonomous, covering the autonomy markets. Waymo's out there raising the big round. A LiDAR company went belly up. The same time, Tesla pulled the safety attendant in Austin. Is it a coincidence or is it something else? We'll discuss. And what we always do, we hit the road and we met with a new autonomy company in San Francisco. And you went on a date. You went on another podcast, not called Lightshed or Autonomy Markets. Tell us about that.
And now, were you jealous, Grayson, when you saw me pop up on the Brighter with Herbert podcast earlier this week? I guess last week now.
I wasn't jealous. I was applauding, and I enjoyed watching in the SFO airport lounge, so you kept me company.
First of all, thank you to Herbert Ong for the podcast. It's a Tesla-focused podcast. I'm sure we picked up some listeners as a result, so welcome to Autonomy Markets. We do cover more than just Tesla here, so I'm sure we'll hear about that in the comments where we make some other discussion topics on things like Waymo and some of the trucking stocks. But it was a great interview. Herbert's a great guy. Talked to him offline. It's a valuable community in many ways because they follow this company so closely, and obviously big things are happening. We went on there right before Tesla went attendant out. But before we get to that, I mean, Autonomy Markets hits the road. That's always a good thing. It's always good to get out there among the companies. And Grayson, I think you have discovered or have met with and even tested an autonomous car from a new company that I've never heard of before. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'll tell you about the company. It's called HYPR, founded by Tim Kentley-Klay, the founder of Zoox. But before we get to that, well, we do great things for our listeners here, Walt. I left my house Sunday at 6 a.m., and I arrived home Monday at 7 a.m. I was only on the ground in San Francisco for less than 6 hours. So the things that we do to produce this wonderful content for our audience. Yes, I was the first non-Hyper employee to go for a ride in the HYPRDRIVE vehicle in San Francisco. We launched from the Ferry Building, went around downtown San Francisco, and it performed well. Very minimal power, as you can see from the video there. And it only cost $850 to train the model. So Tim's whole approach now is less is more. And using learning velocities, the vehicle's constantly learning and making decisions real time with a lot less power.
Hold on for a second. Did you forget a couple of zeros? Did you say $850? $850,000? $850 million? What? Can you go back through that number again?
You heard that correct, Walt. They trained the model to drive the car for $850. That's 850, correct.
All right, so that seems a little unbelievable on its surface. Tell me more about Tim Kentley-Klay. Who is this guy? You mentioned founder of Zoox. Why did he leave Zoox? Like, what's the deal now? How long has he been working on this? Couldn't have been working on it that long if he only spent $150 or $850, to train this system.
That's to train the system. Obviously, there are other costs. He's been working on this in stealth for 2 years, and it's not just a car. We will be going back next year to see the next iteration, but there's a whole robot play going here, and I'm leaving in suspense there. I'm not going to go into it, but it's a lot bigger play than just robotaxis, and they are not going to operate a robotaxi fleet. They were developing an AI brain, and they wanted to see if it could make a car drive itself, and it was. It was very successful. And for the listeners and viewers, vision-only camera. No other additional sensors.
So what's the point of this? Meaning that, if his intention is really not to enter necessarily the autonomous space, what is rigging this car up? And by the way, for those that haven't seen it, go to the Road Autonomy Library, which I've often said is a wealth of content, more than any autonomous, even by the numbers and by the quality, any autonomous, blogs or podcasts that are out there. I think one of it, during part of this video, he was like using a glue gun to attach one of the cameras. So clearly the autonomy is not like the end game. So if it's not the end game necessarily for HYPRLABS, like what was the point of creating this car with $850 to train it?
The point was to validate it. The end game, what they're building, if you want to call the hyper brain, they're building a brain to do autonomous tasks. And when the whole project is unveiled of what they're doing, it gets very, very, very interesting. And there's an overall arching focus on low cost vision only.
So help me and maybe some of our listeners, obviously most of our listeners are probably very smart and already know this answer, but HYPRDRIVE uses 33 watts of compute. I assume that means that that's a very low amount of power for compute. Is there any context to that? And like, why is it so low? Like, how has he been, in his words, been able to achieve this with such low wattage?
It is low, and you are correct. It is 33 watts. It is probably the lowest, if not the lowest, ability to drive a vehicle. I'm not sure what the watts are for the comma system George Hotz built, but he's been able to successfully do it because he believes that less is more when it comes to scaling autonomy, and that all this power, you don't need these sensors. If you look at the Elon thing, it just creates noise.
I mean, you and I have both been in many vehicles with autonomy. I mean, you think about May Mobility, that thing sits in that front passenger seat. It's huge. It's kind of noisy. You know, I remember hopping in the Kodiak truck. They have this large cab. There's massive, obviously, compute there, clearly doing different things, driving other sensors and what have you. So again, like if he's able to do this so efficiently, why not pursue autonomy? Autonomy, as we both agree, seems to be a pretty big market to go after. Why use this as like a test case as opposed to the end case?
I could see a scenario. This is a scenario where they license the technology to fleet operators, but there's a bigger play with the robotics. I'm going to have to keep teasing it there and leaving it vague, but there's a bigger robotics play.
All right. Well, again, you can look for that video on the road to autonomy. Tim Kentley-Klay. I guess congrats on reaching that milestone. It was a great video to watch. I really love the glue gun aspect of fixing the sensor on. I think Waymo spends a little bit more money attaching their sensors. So you're out in the Bay Area. Anything else interesting happen while you're out there? I know it was a compressed time. That's like, I used to do that stuff in my 20s, that road warrior day trip out in the morning flight back on the red eye. No longer. I'm always on the gentleman's flight now. What else did you do or learn out in San Fran?
When we were there, I had to wear my Cousteau hat, so I went into Gemini. Yes, I use Gemini, and it's great. And I said, how do you hack to get a Waymo at SFO? And it said, if you take the BART, one stop, 5 minutes, Millbrae, you can get a Waymo there. BART is a weird scenario there. The lady said, oh, somebody left their bag here. I had to get off there. I'm not going on that train with a bag. Got on the next BART, 5-minute journey to Millbrae. Get out, order a Waymo to go from Millbrae to the ferry building where Tim's office is located. 1 hour and 30 minutes. I said, what the heck? I didn't have highway service. $65, not bad. I said, I can't be there. I've limited time on the ground, so I ordered a Lyft. The Lyft was half the price that it was at SFO. The Lyft was $22. And I got on the highway and I was there in, I don't know, say 20, 30 minutes. But that hour and a half, it demonstrates that you need the highways. And once I have highway access, I'll do it all the time because the Lyft experience wasn't that great. The car was dirty and it just wasn't that great.
You think the price difference was because of fees that are payable to get into the airport and get, whatever pickup areas and things like that? Or is it really them just optimizing, knowing they have tourists that have budgets versus picking up someone in Millbrae?
I thought about this. One is obviously the airport fees. I don't know the exact percentage of that. 2, it's convenience. And then 3, in Millbrae, they know that that's the first place that next to SFO that you can get a Waymo. So they're trying to undercut it. And to me, it says, okay, this Waymo's a threat because they have little green things. Discount, both on Uber and Lyft. And in my opinion, they're trying to persuade you, say, okay, for $20, $30 you can go in ours, or for $60 you can go in Waymo. So I think they're trying to say, hey, we're a cheaper, better option.
Now, I thought you were going to be able to get Waymo at the Kiss and Fly lot. What happened to that as opposed to having to go to Millbrae?
The Kiss and Fly is for employees. And now, I actually think it's more inconvenient to go to the Kiss and Fly than it is to go to Millbrae. I did both. I had to test things. And you can't get it at the hotel on the airport. That's blocked as well. I tried that as well.
Well, we'll go later and talk about some of the silliness that exists in California and how they regulate certain things. But let's leave that there for now in terms of keeping Waymo out. What about the highway? I mean, how long? I mean, and we know that there's employees doing the highway. Hour and 30. This reminds me of when we were doing Waymos, or when I was doing Waymos in LA. Hour and 30, like my experience, San Fran into the city is probably a third of that, right? So this is kind of a non-starter to have this large area in California and not have those highways, even though they get very, trafficked at times. seems kind of silly. When you were on the highways, did you see any Waymos or did you get any sense of, from the people of the Great Bay Area and San Francisco, when we might be able to hop in those Waymos and get on the highways?
So Waymo does have highway. I applied for highway access. I have not been granted highway access there. On my journey to and from the airport, I did not see one single Waymo vehicle. I did not see a Jaguar. And most importantly, even in downtown San Francisco, I didn't see a Zeekr. And I asked the individuals that work at the ferry building right there in the heart of San Francisco, I said, are you seeing Zeekrs? And they said no. It's like, okay, that's a sign. But you know what I saw? I saw the Applied Intuition car. Kasser, really good job there. You're getting your Nissans going around. And what I saw more than anything, the Mercedes NVIDIA car kept going around and around and around and around.
Applied Intuition seems to be one of those companies that just doesn't get talked enough about enough in the autonomy space. We'll spend some time with them out at CES. Looking forward to that. But yeah, it's great that you saw the car. And getting back to the highway, I guess I need to spend a little bit more time on this. So I've opened it up to some people, but still it's so limited that you can't get onto using the highways. I mean, so when is that really considered, I guess, commercial if it's a relatively small group of people that are providing access to this larger service area?
My personal opinion, it's commercial because there's a financial transaction involved.
With what, 5 people? A financial transaction involved with what, 5 people that are approved on the app? I mean, do we have any sense of the numbers of the people that are on this app?
No, we do not have any public sense of what's there.
I mean, look, until we get an answer otherwise, I'm just going to beat the drum again, saying that the reason that this is probably happening is because they don't have enough cars. So if you had the scale of cars in that market, maybe you could open the app and allow Grayson to hop on over to that Kiss and Fly lot. Or even if he picked up that Waymo in Millbrae, to hop on the highway and save an hour of his life by not having to take the back roads.
It'd be nice. And I wonder if the highway is because of the fog issues. There's been several posts on X and Reddit where the Waymos are having fog issues on the highways. Perhaps that's why they're limiting it?
Does LiDAR not work in fog? I mean, weren't we told that LiDAR can see through just about everything?
That's what we were told, but I'm not the engineer. Something doesn't add up here.
So let's move to someone that doesn't have LiDAR. Our friends over at Tesla. We talked about this a little bit, last week, because Elon was effectively hinting towards the fact that they would take that safety attendant out. And sure enough, I think a day or so later, Sawyer Merritt, I think, posted a video that showed, in fact, there was no driver in Austin, which was, I had literally people emailing me on the investment side, oh, it's still not a robo-taxi, and, the typical stuff. And here we have it, videos, they're out. So major milestone for Tesla. We also, Grayson, saw today a picture of a Cybercab, which, if people don't remember, this is the thing that apparently doesn't have the steering wheel. I don't know if the picture showed that or not, because there has been some debate whether there be a steering wheel or not. Probably not. So big milestone for Tesla. What are your thoughts on it?
Tesla's clearly moving towards commercialization. So obviously there's two vehicles. The Tesla Tracker has tracked 2 different license plates. So we've been able to identify 2 vehicles, not just 2 different videos for the complete safety attendant out testing. It's a positive step. The Cybercab, most likely, it has a steering wheel in it. We don't have proof on that, just based on the current NHTSA regulations. But it's a clear step that Tesla is getting closer and closer to launching a full drive route commercial service, with Austin being the first market.
That's great. I mean, obviously, we can't go down. Again, this is not what I would, going back to your last comment on Waymo, not open commercially. I haven't seen any of these Tesla influencers get in one of these cars yet that don't have the attendant. So it's not truly opened. I mean, does this count as year end? Or is this kind of like a half meeting the end of year target? Where are you going to grade this one, Grayson?
It doesn't count until it's part of the fleet. And I still think when the driver safety attendant out is not going to be the full Austin ODD. It's going to be a smaller ODD, perhaps the original ODD that you and I went in. It's a step in the right direction, but this does not count. This is testing.
I mean, I don't really fully appreciate why that's the case, but I get it. Walk before you run. It's the safety culture aspect that I think a lot of people discount that exists at Tesla. It would be great to have them, one of these people hop in there. Hopefully Herbert, maybe send Herbert down there, Brighter with Herbert, get Herbert in there, have him pay $4.20 for the first ride. He told me that he was the first ride down in Austin. He was happy to hear that you and I also had an opportunity to hop in these robo-taxis. We'll give it some time. We'll let, the more fervent people get down there first, and then hopefully maybe sometime later in January or February, as they start to ramp, which is the thing that we care about a bit more, we'll get there and bring a new video to our listeners and our watchers and our video watchers, YouTube watchers, about this. Still a week left, though. Do you think Herbert or others can get down there and pay for a ride before the end of the year?
I'm going to hedge and give you a 45% chance in a limited ODD.
Okay. I mean, you keep saying limited ODD. That's fine. I think I'm going to say 70% chance Herbert. He hasn't told me. I should have texted him before this podcast. Say, hey, man, give me the word. Are they telling you can get down there before year end? A little Christmas ride. I think there's one of them that kind of lives down there. What about, how are you feeling about both of ours' belief that middle of next year, they're in the hundreds of cars in Austin?
I am very confident on it because they have the manufacturing ability. I'm very, very confident.
Yeah, I mean, as we both know, it's nothing to do with manufacturing. I mean, some have suggested there's like some people keep persisting that there's like something special about these cars. We carefully examine these things for extra sensors or difference. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, like, again, we both use these cars every day. Like, if there is any differences, like, what are the differences? I mean, I live in this car every day. It feels as smooth as it did as when we were in Austin, but whatever. So, the cars will hopefully scale up by mid-year. That'll be another, I think, milestone. But look, this in and of itself, just having those cars without the safety attendant is big. We'll see what happens year end. Last question on this topic. What's the next market for these guys?
I'm going to base this on validation engineers they're hiring, regulatory environments, regulatory filings. The Phoenix metropolitan area most likely will be next, potentially followed by a Florida market. But I believe, based on the regulatory filings, the engineers that are being hired, it'll be the Phoenix metro market. What part of the Phoenix market? I don't know. Not going to speculate on that, but I believe it will be the Phoenix metro region.
Well, you heard it there first. For our Phoenix listeners, you should look forward to getting there. By the way, I did see some more Twitter dialogue about, people talking about or hoping for a Waymo One app in Austin. So that'll be like kind of our next factor there, is like, as Tesla's ramping 300 cars, in Austin, does Waymo start to appear on their own app? Maybe that'll be a prediction for later. But the bigger comedic timing of this week, which was just precious, was Luminar, a LiDAR maker, I guess, filing Chapter 11 the same time. Literally, it's like the same day this news is hitting as the Tesla Attendant is out. Now, these two things are not directly connected, but, we're up to 60 some odd episodes on this thing. Obviously, there's been, in our comments and otherwise, a lot of debate about the need for LiDAR versus not. Certainly, Luminar going bankrupt is not an indication, definitive indication that LiDAR is not needed. If you didn't know this already, Waymo developed their own LiDAR. It's in a lot of these other vehicles. But, I mean, that was pretty classic timing, was it not?
If file is under shit you can't make up. I mean, you couldn't have scripted the storyline any better. All the haters and doubters, you can't drive a car vision only. Well, Tesla just proved you wrong on the day that the once leading LiDAR company went belly up. No, you couldn't have done this any better. And you were on an earnings call with Luminar and you asked a question about Volvo and you didn't get invited back, and then this happened. What did you learn when you asked questions on the earnings call?
The Volvo thing's hilarious, and I think we were early on this for our longtime podcast listeners of this one and the Lightshed podcast, because my business partner, Rich Greenfield, was trying to buy or owned an EX90 or whatever the model is that was supposed to, or had this Luminar, and that thing was a lemon of a car, an absolute lemon. Now, look, if you look at what ultimately killed Luminar, I think Volvo played a key role. And I got on the Q2 earnings call. I'm on all these calls. I register for questions. They don't always take it. You had Goldman, JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank. None of them are asking. This is Q2 of this year. None of them asking about Volvo, which seems to me, maybe I was too obsessed because of Rich Greenfield's experiences, like the biggest issue. So I ask about like, what's going on with Volvo? How's that partnership? And like, oh yeah, the partnership's fine. Lo and behold, that created a lot of a shitstorm on like the LiDAR and the Luminar Reddits, and people were coming after me for like, going after them about Volvo. Some were appreciative. We go to Q3, all of a sudden I can't get a question on the call. They only take 2 questions. And next thing you know, the company's announcing bankruptcy, in part because in that interim, the relationship with Volvo came to an abrupt end. So I got in there. I got one shot in. I asked the most important question and then shut out. But it was, what a year. And look, I met with these guys last year at CES. It's only been a year since they were talking about this new sensor is going to get smaller and Volvo was going to ramp it up. And now, they are no more.
There's that old saying, talk is cheap. No pun intended. That's what happened. Volvo, this was on the Geely side. So this was the car side owned by Geely, which owns Zeekr, by the way, Chinese ownership there. And then on the truck side, which is still owned by the Swedish company, Aurora's having some issues with Volvo as well because they're doing the whole international upfitting. It just seems that perhaps Volvo could be a little prickly or hard to deal with.
Well, it's a separate side of Volvo, and we're also going to spend a little time with them, at CES. So hopefully we get some more info there. But it also reminds me, like I infiltrated the PACCAR earnings call. PACCAR, for our listeners who may be more focused on cars, is a truck maker who was partnered with Aurora, the autonomy technology company, right about the time when they were not allowing them to take the safety driver out of the driver's seat. So I was able to, PACCAR was a lot more cool. I haven't tried to, maybe I should go back on the PACCAR call this fourth quarter and say, like, what's up? When are you going to allow them to take that driver out? Because now they're talking about going in the Permian Basin. I'm talking about Aurora now. They're going to the Permian Basin because maybe you're not letting them scale up those PACCAR trucks the way they need to. Anyway, I digress. But it's always fun to learn in the peripheral companies that impact this industry, for sure.
That's what we do here. We learn, we read the news, and we analyze it. In California, boy, we've got some news where a judge is saying that she wants Tesla to be shut down of sales. And the DMV is pushing back. What have you learned about that?
Grayson, to me, the timing of this is also a little suspect. I know that there's, not to be a conspiracy theorist, but because I know this is a result of a long trial process that was initiated, I think, initially by the DMV. The DMV director was appointed by Governor Newsom, as I recall. It goes to what's called an ALJ. I'm very familiar with this with our work at the FCC. An ALJ is like, if you have a deal in front of the FCC and they send it to the ALJ, the administrative law judge, it's like a death sentence because it takes forever, and they basically just bleed you to death in terms of, in this case, there was nothing the ALJ could do. They weren't proactively stopping them, but you have this Newsom appointed director doing this lawsuit, and they make a recommendation to stop sales. Granted, it's suspended 90 days, whatever it is, but like, I did a little LLM searching, so I'm not going to say that this is factually true. Like, there could be some hallucinations. It sounds like this is unprecedented, that the DMV would go to the point of like trying to stop the sales of a manufacturing company. And we're not even talking about an international company selling products. We're talking about a U.S. company for how they advertised FSD. And for, again, longtime listeners, that I have 2 Teslas. When I went in to buy the second Tesla, they weren't pushing or advertising FSD at all. And when we both use FSD, if your eyes look away, it gives you a warning. You do that a couple of times, it literally locks you out of the system. And the bigger issue is like how it's saving people from bad driving in general. So to me, this is like just a crazy political thing. This is like, not dissimilar to when Elon wasn't invited to the EV summit that they had under the Biden administration. It's not dissimilar to a vice presidential candidate celebrating an American's company stock price, which, by the way, is now near an all-time high. It just felt political. Am I wrong? Is the DMV more independent than I'm perceiving? Because the timing on this And this unprecedented act just seems kind of crazy.
This seems highly political. What the true motive behind it, unsure, but highly political, it looks like. We don't have enough insider details to give it to you, but I'll just sum it this way. Something doesn't smell right.
Well, we'll see if it actually gets implemented. I mean, obviously, mainstream media went with the headlines, as they love to do. I get it. It gets clicks. We'll see if anything actually happens, and sucks for people in California not be able to buy Teslas, but I'll be able to use it at least until, maybe till the end of the year. Who knows what happens in New York? We probably have similar issues. Let's move on to Sterling Anderson, friend of the pod, formerly at Aurora, moved over to GM, heard of this company, GM, to start on June 2nd. On May 15th, which was episode 37 of the Autonomy Markets podcast, Grayson Brulte said the following: "It seems that Mr. Anderson," and I'm just speculating here, but reading the tea leaves, that Ms. Barra has 2 years left until she is the mandatory retirement age, that perhaps Mr. Anderson is being groomed to be the next CEO of GM. It's a real plausible situation. I'll have to admit, Grayson, when you said that at the time, I'm thinking, oh my God, here comes Grayson. What is he talking about? This dude, this guy just came in from Aurora. Yes, he used to work at Tesla and all these places, but what does that have to do with working at this major company? We talked about this a couple more times. I pushed back, and holy cow, this week, Bloomberg effectively validates what your call was back in May, saying that Sterling is in fact the front runner to be the next CEO. And quote, the understanding was that he was hired, that if he can satisfy Barra, who's the current CEO's demand for him to bring cutting edge software and self-driving technology to GM, which he clearly is in the process of doing, he has a quote, good shot at succeeding her. So holy cow, Grayson, you nailed this one. Do you think this is a done deal now that he takes over in 26?
Nothing's a done deal. Nothing's a done deal. I do believe that Mr. Anderson is the right person if the board does choose to make him CEO of GM, and if he does ascend to the CEO role, GM becomes a very cutting edge company, and I wouldn't be surprised to see autonomy go throughout the entire GM lineup. They're building chips now. They have the battery business. There's something special could come together, and they could have a massive comeback. And not to get into Detroit politics here, where I think Mr. Anderson is going, and if you read the tea leaves of all the statements Mr. Anderson has made or the corporate filings GM has made over the last 6 months, they're about to completely go over the top and beat Ford. And to the folks in Detroit, it's a big rivalry, but they're positioned to outflank Ford and outmaneuver Ford as Ford takes an $18.5 billion write-down on their failed EV bet.
I mean, maybe they're getting out of EV is a reflection of no dedication, but it doesn't seem to me that the CEO of Ford is someone that has the commitment to a new technology, and this being AV. So it could be a pivotal difference between these two companies. It would be, GM, it's still an OEM, it's still slow moving. Don't you think it's almost like they should put Sterling in there yesterday? Do we really need to wait till 26 or 27, but to wait for Sterling to start moving the company in that direction, which in both of our views is the future for vehicles?
He's already started to have a positive impact. They had their day in New York, a lot of statements there. I'm going back to the chip architecture, but there's a lot of movements in his role as chief product officer that you're starting to see implemented, and GM is moving faster. And at some point, I'll make another prediction. The 7-year design cycle, update cycle for GM vehicles is going to go by the wayside. You're going to see a lot faster iterations on vehicles going forward.
Do you worry about the politics of a large company? Sterling, comes from scrappy startups, move fast. He's at a larger company right now. When you see someone, a newcomer, come in, playing for the top job, there's probably other people at GM that were hoping for that job. Usually see a lot of turnover. Does he have the mettle to withstand maybe some of the politics that it's going to take to get that final appointment?
Mentally, yes. I think Mr. Anderson does. What the politics are inside, I don't have any insight to that, but I believe Mr. Anderson mentally is ready for it. I believe he's capable for it. And frankly, if he does become CEO, I think it's a really good thing for GM. I think it's a good thing for GM shareholders. And most importantly, the employees and customers. It's good for them as well.
Well, best of luck to him. I mean, I don't certainly fully necessarily embrace the view of, doing this all on their own. I think maybe, they should look towards autonomy partnerships. Look, maybe 26 is going to be the year of some consolidation where some of the more successful autonomy companies that we follow get bought by, some of these large OEMs. But we'll have to see how that plays out, because a lot of the OEMs, whether it's Rivian or GM or Ford, have like a build it here mentality as opposed to partner.
I would not be surprised, and I'll make a prediction. This is not necessarily related to GM, but I wouldn't be surprised in the next 12 to 18 months to see a global OEM buy Wave. And if that happens, then I think Neuro's in play. And then you're going to start this massive consolidation.
Right. I mean, they're going to have to give any of these guys a big number, because right now they want to justify valuations based on licensing their technology to multiple OEMs. So you're going to have a takeout bid that pays investors for that, if that's going to take place. But we'll see how that plays out. We'll see how the capital markets are, right? If Wave and Neuro and others have free-flowing capital, that will make that price probably higher, because they'd want to develop it and take their shot. It's kind of like, do you sell to Facebook now, or do you, ride this out for, some larger opportunity? So on the capital raise front, we do have one of the beasts in the market, Waymo, subsidiary of Google, quote unquote, in talks to raise $15 billion at $110 billion valuation in a round led by Alphabet. For context, I mean, $100 billion. I mean, my context is the trillions in the companies that I cover. So 110, actually, I don't know. It doesn't seem, that expensive for the opportunity set in front of Waymo. The other question is, like, why do external, obviously Google's got a ton of money, why give up any economics, especially at a $110 billion valuation at this point? What do they need the money for?
Why Waymo's taking outside capital now, unsure. If we go back to when Waymo first raised outside capital, the speculation was rampant that Alphabet was lukewarm on Waymo and didn't know what it wanted to do and wanted to diversify the funding in case they decided they no longer wanted to fund it. They had a path to do it, to spin it out. What we know today, Waymo's highly successful. They're the most successful robotaxi company in the world. They're scaling. They're at 450,000 rides a week. They're projected to go to 1 million rides a week. So why raise outside capital now? I don't know. And their stock's went up 56% this year, the Google stock, and Gemini's rocket and roll. And Alphabet is dominating AI now, so the cash flows are chugging along. I don't know. I got to throw it back to you as the Wall Street analyst here. I don't know.
Well, they're doing this after announcing a bunch of markets, which people are calling scalability because of the concerns in the past about acquiring mapping to get to new markets. The next big milestone that you and I both agree is getting the cars. But I mean, I think getting the cars is reflective of the 1 million weekly paid rides. We know they're currently at 450 paid weekly rides per week. That was up from, I think it was 200 or 250, something like that in April. So doubling, over that period of time. What does that mean in terms of getting to 1 million? Is it as scalable, especially given our knowledge of the kind of limitations they have on scaling cars? Just for our listeners, expectation would be that cars double, Waymo cars double from about 2,500 to 5,000 by the end of 26.
Prediction, April, May 2026. Waymo's hitting 1 million paid rides a week, because I believe that the vehicle supply will ramp up. They're going to pull a rabbit out of their hat, in my opinion, and magically some Jaguars are going to show up. I know it sounds crazy, but I have a feeling they're going to pull a rabbit in their hat. So I'm going to say April, May, Waymo will hit 1 million paid rides a week.
I'm going to take the over on that, because that seems pretty, I mean, if you think about it, they only added a couple 100,000 from April, which is great. But I'm saying, like, to add 500,000 additional by April, May, I'm taking the over. I don't know, I'm thinking maybe the fall. But just getting back to the original question, so they raised off of the scalability. They'll raise again, at some point next year when they're approaching 1 million and you see a lot more cars on the market. Or maybe we're getting this all wrong and the whole market has it wrong, and it's going to be much more than 5,000 cars that they hit by year end.
It's interesting from the vehicle standpoint. CNBC reported this, that, and Sundar said this, I'm going to quote this, that Waymo will meaningfully contribute to Alphabet's financials as soon as 2027. That's a direct quote from Sundar. So me being the analyst says, what does he know that we don't know? Is there a vehicle supply coming? Because to immediately contribute to Alphabet's revenue, those are big numbers we're talking about. You've got to get to some big numbers to actually meaningfully contribute.
Yeah, I think billion ARR is probably certainly achievable, right? So that would be meaningful enough for Alphabet, I would think. Maybe not. But again, it'll probably be on the revenue side of things more so than anybody when he's talking about meaningfully. And revenue growth is obviously what people care about for growth companies, for sure.
The thing, reading the tea leaves here, it seems that, this is my opinion, that Sundar is all in on Waymo. Because you're starting to notice on the earnings calls, he's getting questions, he's answering with excitement, he's doing his opening remarks. And am I reading that right? That the excitement is there from him?
He's so in on Waymo that he's raising external capital. How does that work? Because that's effectively you're selling economic stakes in this entity. I'm not saying he isn't, but like, okay, if you love it so much, why take external capital? When you look at the list of people that invested last time, no offense to those investors, I wouldn't say it's necessarily strategic in terms of the investors there.
No, let's just say Hyundai came in for 10 billion or 5 billion. Okay, strategic, but you're right. I don't know. I'm going to have to defer and volley that back to you. So
if Hyundai came in for 10 billion and then they used that money to buy Hyundai cars, isn't that one of those like kind of circular things that we talk about when we're talking about ChatGPT?
That's an NVIDIA-like deal.
NVIDIA. So other news on Waymo, Vegas full commercial launch is scheduled for the summer. Congrats. I wish, it was there for CES. So we'll be busy looking for Zooks, I guess, at CES to get around.
We will. And do you want to, not to go forward here, when I was in San Francisco, I didn't see one Zooks vehicle.
Were you in downtown? Because I think that they do have a service area like down by the Mission, maybe, or no?
I was down on the water at the Maritime building and then went inland towards the Trans-Pacific, Trans-American building. Nothing. It was very interesting.
Well, maybe they shipped them all to Vegas and get ready for CES. CES, can't wait, by the way. I think Mobileye is doing a keynote. I don't know what to say there. I think we're going to be seeing most people there, so it's great. If you haven't already and you're planning on going, definitely hit us up. We got some good stuff planned for their CES in Las Vegas. So let us know and just send us some emails.
Yeah, reach out to us. Walt and I will be there experiencing the hectic stuff of CES and meeting with a lot of great autonomy companies. And I want to take us to Telco Corner. We haven't been there in a while. Our good friends over at Kodiak did a deal with Verizon. I said, it's a Walt time. It's Walt's time. It's Verizon. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So, basically they want to have connectivity to these trucks, and especially in Kodiak's case, Permian Basin, which I definitely want to go visit. Sounds awesome. At least some of those towns. And to connect to make sure where there's maybe not a lot of coverage. Congrats to both companies, but look, Don, I think you're going to be at CES. Maybe we should introduce you to our friends over at SpaceX. We can get you satellite connectivity to those trucks. I don't think there's a lot of infrastructure that Verizon is going to continue to put out. They have a new CEO that's firing a ton of people, cutting back on CapEx. So I'm not sure that they're going to all, have a long-term coverage advantage over some of the satellites. But the funnier thing when I saw the headline was, years ago, when you remember this technology 5G that came out, and there was some like conspiracy theorists that would wear tinfoil hats and think that it did all these bad things. People were like, we're burning down 5G cell sites in Europe. 5G was meant to many people to enable autonomy. This theory was that the low latency of 5G was going to enable the car driving 60 miles an hour to communicate with everything around it. And as I was learning about, autonomy at the time, and you talk to anyone with half a brain in autonomy, they're like, yeah, no, we can never rely on the networks for 5G. All of those decisions are going to be happening so fast that compute and that is going to have to happen there. But that didn't stop in my other world of coverage. A lot of people saying, go buy, infrastructure companies like Ericsson or Nokia or wireless companies, because 5G is going to enable autonomy. So I just thought that this was kind of an interesting footnote to the 5G autonomy space, that here we are, it's now a trucking company with IoT in the middle of the Permian Basin is about as close as we're getting to 5G enabling autonomy. But anyway, congrats, I guess, to both companies.
I remember the pitches I would get. You would get these maps of the connected corridors, the connected highways, and then you would need all this stuff. And the same thing when everybody pitched the Vita X. And for the audience, that's vehicle to everything from a connectivity standpoint. Well, we're in the middle of connecting all of the autonomy news and breaking it down each and every week. What do we need to look for in the autonomy markets next week besides Santa's autonomous sleigh?
I think we need to look for nothing next week. Just have a nice eggnog, buy your Christmas tree or whatever holiday that you happen to be celebrating. Everyone take a little time to reflect on the year and be with your loved ones. And I think it's, I think we're going to skip 1 week this year, and we'll be back to you in the new year.
We're taking off the Christmas week, and we'll be back to you next year with great shows. And to the listeners and viewers, thank you so much for a wonderful year of comments, feedbacks, laughs. And Walt, it's been a lot of fun. And next year, we're only going to have more fun. And to the listeners and viewers, don't worry. I got plenty of good hats lined up. And on the road to autonomy, Permian Pete came on, and I wore a cowboy hat. So that's a little sneak peek for that. Until next year, the future is bright, the future is autonomous, the future is scaling robotaxis.